All right. Hey, my friend, and welcome to today's episode where I want to talk about what to do when you feel like you're failing or you feel like you're a failure. And yeah, really just speak into this idea. And this came from, an idea from an email that I got this week. And so wanted to speak into it. So with that, before we dive in, if you don't know me, my name is Matt Codde. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Restored Minds. I have some links down in the notes if you are looking for help on your recovery from OCD and anxiety and stress related conditions. You can also head over to restoredminds.com. And if you like the show, please help us out by liking, subscribing, and leaving a nice review on iTunes and Spotify. So let's dive in. Feeling like a failure. So this can take form in a couple different ways, and so I think I'll speak into a few during this, and really speak into those listening who feel that way, because I think these messages specifically need to be heard in certain days of the journey. So when you're going through something like OCD and anxiety, and dealing with chronic anxiety, chronic stress, your body is really activated, your sleep's messed up, your health's messed up, your relationships, your job, right? Everything just feels like chaos. And you're trying really, really hard to fix yourself. And the paradox is the harder you're trying to fix yourself, oftentimes the worse you're making yourself. That's the true paradox of this whole thing, is that trying to fight off your thoughts, trying to get rid of your feelings you don't want, is making it worse. And the more you do it, the more effort you put, the more energy you put, the more attention you put on it, the worse you will progressively get. There's just a direct correlation to that. Because essentially it's like, if you imagine that there's this tank of, let's just use a simple analogy. Like, there's a tank of steam. The more steam you put into it, the more pressure that builds up into it, the more it's just going to blow up, right? And the more, even when you just take the lid off, the more steam's going to fly out in those lids. Now, metaphorically, we're talking about our emotions, and we're talking about our emotional system when we're talking about stuffing stuff down. So when you're stuffing fear down, you're stuffing guilt down, you're stuffing anger down, you're stuffing shame and pride and, depression, apathy, fear, and you're just stuffing this all down. It stands to reason. It's pretty logical, right? When you think about it, that if you stuff everything down into a tank, it's going to blow up. It's going to come up at some point, right? So oftentimes when we feel like a failure, it's simply because we're contextualizing something inappropriately. So if you feel like I'm working really hard and I'm not getting anywhere, it's not necessarily that you're not getting anywhere because you're not trying enough. Oftentimes you're just trying the wrong thing. You're just doing the exact thing you shouldn't do. And even though it seems like the thing you should be doing, but it's directly, impacting, it's directly working against what you're trying to achieve, right? It's like, I use this analogy sometimes of, like, imagine that you have a backyard, right? And you walk out in your backyard and it's muddy, and your perception is that the mud is the issue, right? That you're looking at the mud and you don't want the mud. You want a nice, dry, pleasant grass to, sit in, play in with your kids, let the dog, whatever. And you walk outside and it's all muddy. If your perception is that there's a mud problem and you try to solve a mud problem and you start shoveling out all the mud again and again and again and again and again, and you walk outside the next day and there's more and more mud, it's easy to look and see, like, well, I'm failing, right? Like, I'm not getting the result I want. But if you're not perceiving the problem correctly, let's say that there's a broken water main, right? And the water is running into your yard, okay? No matter how much mud you scoop out, the water's just going to create more and more mud, right? It's not that your effort is in vain, it's just misdirected. It's not that you're a failure. You're using your energy in a insufficient way, right? It's directed inappropriately. Now, if you channel all your effort into, okay, how do I stop the water? Interestingly enough, the mud problem would resolve itself. This is kind of how this works with OCD and anxiety and chronic states of stress, right? Insomnia, right? Chronic pain. oftentimes our energy is simply misdirected. What recovery is about understanding the problem correctly, understanding the right context, understanding the tools, mastering and embodying the tools. This is where most people go wrong, is they think that they merely, if they understand something, that means that they've gotten it and that they don't need anything else. Understanding something is not going to get you better, right? Learning about it and taking information in is not going to get you better. It's the embodying of that information, the implementing it to the point where it just becomes part of what you do. When you understand OCD and anxiety is not a feeling and thought problem, but a loop issue that is self-perpetuating, you begin totally revamping the way you do things. When you really get that. I understand that many people are going to say, yeah, I understand it's a loop issue, but they still go and try to stop all their thoughts and feelings. Understanding a concept that it's a loop issue and embodying something totally different isn't going to get you better. So if you feel like a failure, a lot of times it's about asking yourself, like, how am I? It's not about working harder or working smarter or anything. It's about channeling your energy in a complete different direction sometimes. So that's step one when it comes to like feeling like a failure. Is really, if you feel like a failure, oftentimes it's not really that you're failing. It's that you either don't have the correct guidance, you don't have the correct tools, and you're not embodying the things correctly. Like that's kind of it, right? It's like in the mud analogy, right? If you're using a shovel and trying to solve a mud problem, when there's a broken pipe and what you need to do is actually, again, like seal off the pipe, you need a completely different set of tools to solve a completely different problem. As much as you may think you know what the problem is, you probably don't. And if you're channeling all your energy into solving the wrong problem, you're not going to solve it because you're solving the wrong thing. I mean, that's the most practical way I can say it. Now, let's take it one step further and going into, well, I feel like I'm failing at life because of where you are in your journey and where maybe your peers are, right? This is a different way of feeling like a failure. So this can be challenging, right? I remember, I can totally connect to this. I mean, I remember, my struggle with OCD and anxiety really onset when I was about 18. Got really bad for probably 3 to 5 years, something like that, right? There was just a period where I just was trying everything I could to help myself and it wasn't getting better. So I just got progressively worse. It wasn't until I think 3, 4, 5 years in that, 4 to 5 years in, that someone even told me that I was dealing with OCD and anxiety, and I talk about that in my book, so I won't go into it today. But when you feel like a failure in life, okay, oftentimes what we're doing is we're comparing ourselves to other people on a completely different journey than our own. And so when I was going through OCD and anxiety, most of my friends, that I had at the time had gone off to college, right? And I'd reconnect to them from time to time, but talking about these amazing collegiate experiences they were having, right? So just meeting a lot of friends, having fun, right? Partying, right? And just again, living college life, right? Me, during my college years, getting through the day was a success for me. That was about my benchmark for what a good day was. I didn't have friends, was not dating, right? Life was a very challenging time. So as time went on and, I'm watching people get careers and all of that, I was behind. I felt behind, from where a lot of my friends were going. Because I didn't know what I was going to do. I was able to graduate, but I just had no bearing in direction, and let alone no relationships. And I just felt behind in certain aspects of my life. And I felt like a failure. And the reality is, what I've come to learn is I wasn't failing, is that I was on a certain journey. And that journey was part of me developing my mental, emotional, health because it was an aspect that I didn't develop early on. And so I needed to have some time and energy focused on that. And by me focusing and growing and I would even incorporate the idea of it's also a spiritual journey if you really embrace it for what it is. That growth, that aspect, me going through that struggle led to me then going on a path of what I do now, right? Where I'm able to help people not only with OCD and anxiety, but really, through the whole idea of consciousness in general, how to navigate difficult emotions, how to move through things, again, mainly fear, but also things like anger, shame, guilt, right? Things that create barriers for us to really, that we often just avoid and suppress and kind of compartmentalize and never really learn to navigate. And so when I've learned how to do it myself, that enabled me the opportunity to then not only grow as an individual, but become someone who could then help other people. And that served me on my long-term path. Now, I couldn't see that at the time. So again, in this case, when you feel like a failure, oftentimes you don't know the grand path, right, of life. And oftentimes you are taking one snippet of your life and comparing it to a snippet of someone else's and saying, oh, well, they're better than me in this arena, so I failed. Where really their journey may start in 10 years from now when they need to go through whatever they need to go through to become who they're supposed to become on this earth. And if you understood that the point of our time on this earth is not to reach these milestones that oftentimes society just creates for no, the traditional milestones that everyone sets of, oh, you need to go to college and you need to get a job and you need to get married and you need to have kids, you need to get a 401k, you need to retire, you need to do this. When you're following a life script that someone else created and you're not following your own, you're going to feel like in a lot of conflict. And that's oftentimes where it is. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to college. There's nothing wrong with getting a job, or if you want to build a family, there's nothing wrong with it at all. But if you're just doing it because you think you're supposed to, you're going to feel out of alignment because you're not really connected to your own journey. And what I realized is part of my journey that was I had to go through that at that time. And that was part of a bigger story that I couldn't see at the time. Was I failing? No. It's just part of a story that I didn't know how the rest of it was playing out, and you don't know how yours is playing out. So that's another way of, again, recontextualizing that. Now, all that to say, there is such thing as failure, and I'm going to define it quickly. Failing is the only way that you can really fail is when you decide to quit. When you decide, I'm not doing anything for myself, I'm not going to do anything to better myself, I'm not going to keep moving forward, I just quit. That's the only true way that failure exists. If you're continuing to wake up and you're continuing to put one foot in front of the other, and you're continuing to strive for better, strive for health, strive for good, your success is inevitable. The only way you can truly fail, right, in my belief about failure, is when you decide to give up on you. All other failure is an illusion and just something that is just not contextualized correctly. And so those are my thoughts on failure, and I hope they help you if you're experiencing this perception today. And with that, wishing you a great day and a great week, and looking forward to seeing you soon. Hey there, thanks so much for watching that episode. If you found it helpful, we have some links to some other episodes that we think you might like as well. And if you're looking for help on your journey to recovery from fear, stress, and anxiety, either check out the links in the notes or head over to restoredminds.com. Thank you, and talk to you soon.